Well, hey, my name is Jarrett Stevens, and I'm one of the co-lead pastors of Soul City Church. And as a church, we've been having conversations for many, many years, but more specifically the last couple weeks, on what it looks like to be a good neighbor, what it looks like to love everyone, everywhere, no matter who we are with. And I am so excited for this conversation. It's been months in the making for us to sit down and have a conversation around different expressions of faith, of worldview, and how is it that you can love others and sit at a table, shoulder to shoulder, even if you don't see eye to eye on everything. And how can we actually find a greater good that we can be a part of together? And so I am very excited for this conversation. I'm excited for you to meet some of our friends here today. So without any further ado, we'll just kind of go right down the line. Would love for each of you to introduce yourselves. Let us know a little bit about who you are, where you live, what you do, any important favorite Chicago food, anything, whatever you got to help us know you, we'd love to know.
So my name is Ibu Patel. I'm founder and president of an organization called Interfaith America. I am an American Muslim from India. I'm part of specifically the Ismaili Muslim community, which is a small Shia community. The work that we do at Interfaith America is we lift up the fact that the United States is the most religiously diverse nation in human history, the most religiously devout nation in the Western Hemisphere. Religion is an extremely important part of the kind of symbolic understanding that we have of our country, city upon a hill, better angels of our nature, beloved community, et cetera, et cetera. It's also a crucial part of our social capital in the nation. And we say all the time that diversity is not just the differences that you like, that the only way to have a diverse democracy is for people to be able to disagree on some fundamental things and work together on other fundamental things. And I am going to steal your line that people of different backgrounds should be able to sit shoulder to shoulder, even if they can't see eye to eye. And I have to say, this is a special place for me to be, because one of the people I admire and appreciate as much as anybody in the world, my friend and colleague, Amber G. Hacker, she comes to church here. So I think this is a sacred space because my friend finds her soul food here.
That's very meaningful. Thank you, Ibu. Yeah, Freeney.
I'm Rabbi Rainey Dickman. I'm the executive vice president of the Chicago Board of Rabbis, which is an organization that works to support rabbis, communicate with rabbis, provide resources for rabbis all over the metropolitan area. And I'm also a Jewish educator at Jewish United Fund, which is the social services organization of the Jewish community. We serve hundreds of thousands of people, Jewish and not Jewish. And I work directly with staff there, providing Jewish education for the staff.
Yes.
I live in Evanston. I am a graduate of the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, which is the rabbinical school of the Reform movement. I also am a member of Anshe Emet, which is a conservative congregation. I'm an Ashkenazi Jew. That's my family lineage. And in terms of my participation in the Jewish community, and we'll talk more about this, well, I'll just leave it there.
Okay, Father Peter, tell us a little bit about who you are.
Peter Łuczyga. I'm a pastor of St. Clement Church, which is in Lincoln Park. Was born in Poland, migrated here over 20 years ago, went through schools here, and been a pastor there for 4 years now, serving that congregation. I actually went to culinary school before, so speaking about food, I actually can cook.
Wow.
Don't have much time to do it.
Right.
But as the invitation came up and as we talk about getting together for this conversation, I thought, boy, this will be a first time when I will meet with other faith leaders in a long time that is not a wedding. Because usually every weekend I have weddings all over the town or in our own place with rabbis or folks from Muslim community or other Christian pastors. And so I thought, well, it's kind of fun to be somewhere and not to do a wedding for it.
Yeah, right.
So,
I mean, we can arrange something. If you want to do a emergency wedding, we can do that real quick. Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's good. Well, we're glad that you are here. And we can go kind of back down the line. Father Peter, start with you. What would you say is it that drew you to your faith, what your religious experience? What was it? For some folks, they're just kind of born into it. But for many folks, it's a choice, a conscious choice that they make. What was that for you? What did that look like for you? I'd love to hear from each of you on that.
I think really it it is the experience of my grandmother. I was very blessed growing up that I spent a lot of time with my grandparents in the summer or on the weekends. My parents were in school, and really my grandmother had this extremely deep faith that not only was able to change who she was on an ongoing basis, but really she changed the whole fabric of the neighborhood, of the place where she lived. And you could see it, you could sense it, even as a child. I remember getting up in the morning and seeing her praying and going to bed and seeing her pray. And I knew that all of it was just transforming of who she was. And later on in life, when I was kind of deciding what to do, I really remember that posture of prayer that really transformed her, and through her transformed a whole community. And so that really was, I think, the strongest impulse that I got, not only to engage in faith, but also to see firsthand how the faith experience can not only change my life, but in my really encounter God in it, how it can change the fabric of the community and a neighborhood. So it's really, my grandmother was
It's what a legacy. That's beautiful. Yeah. Rabbi Rini, what would you say?
Well, first I'll say that the word faith is not a word that Jewish people are very comfortable with or use that much. So I'll answer your question talking about my being drawn to Jewish life. I can talk more about why that word faith is challenging. I'll just say that we talk about the Jewish people as Am Yisrael, which is the people who wrestle with God. And so a lot of our relationship with God is one of wrestling. And the word faith, I think, to me, connotes a surety that we don't always have.
Yeah.
And so there's a real wrestling. But in terms of my being drawn to Jewish life, I'll say I was also very blessed with mentors in my life who really showed me the beauty and the joy and the meaning of living a Jewish life. And one was my rabbi growing up, who was also my cousin. His name was Rabbi Mark Shapiro of blessed memory, who just spoke with such wisdom, and I wanted to be like him. I wanted to speak with wisdom. And the other was other Jewish experiences that I had living in community. And that's more than faith. I think Jewish people talk about living in community and belonging to a family.
Yeah.
And all the experiences that I had where I felt part of a family and a community taught me that that's what I wanted to do with my life, to build experiences like that for other people.
And you have a pretty significant scale. You really have. You have. Yeah, that's amazing. That's great. And I appreciate that clarity too. I love the idea of the difference between faith and wrestling and how that can shape and form an identity. And that makes a ton of sense to me. I love that clarity. Thank you. How about you? What would you say?
Yeah, so I actually do like the word faith. Part of it is because it's a word that's frequently that has an important role in Islam. There's an Arabic term, deen, which basically means faith, and we talk about deen and dunya, which is like your faith in the material world and the kind of the duality of that. And the second reason is because I'm a geek and I went to grad school, and there's a scholar that I like named Wilford Cantwell Smith, who says that the term faith means a relationship with a tradition, which is maybe a definition that might be comfortable for you. But so I think of Islam as a tradition, as we all think of our religions as a tradition, which has many parts, right? So the Quran is an important part of it, but Rumi, a Sufi poet, is an important part, and Islamic architecture is an important part. And for Ismailis, the Aga Khan, which is the spiritual leader of our tradition, who's kind of a pope figure, we're in many ways the Catholics of Islam. All of these are important parts of the faith, and there's many parts, and it's virtually impossible to think all of them are equally important.
Right.
And so you have faith, you have a relationship with the tradition, which kind of guides your path. And so I came to a stronger faith actually in my early 20s. I'd been kind of a hair on fire activist in my late teens when I was in college, motivated more by anger than by love, and that was a problem because I'm not an angry person by nature. It was actually learning about Dorothy Day that provided an off-ramp to me in my activism of anger toward kind of an activism of love. And Dorothy Day was a great Catholic hero who started the Catholic worker movement. And that began my path of reading in multiple different religions about approaches to social action and social service and social justice. And so the example of Abraham Joshua Heschel, very, very important to me in my search. And then one day I'm in my dorm room at Oxford University, where I went to grad school, and I'm reading the Quran. And I'm almost reading it out of like literary interest, you know. And there's a passage in Surah 2 which says that God gave you his breath and made you his Abd and Khalifa, his servant and representative on earth. And you are meant to basically carry out God's mercy on earth. And that was at that time in my life, and like it's fed me in a really beautiful way. And it's a sense of like, oh, you have a purpose that comes from God.
Yeah.
There's a beautiful purpose.
Yeah.
And what does it look like to carry it?
Yeah. And what does it look like to continue to fight for the rights and the freedoms that you are fighting for others from that place of
That's exactly
and
right.
grace and mercy,
Yeah.
different energy.
Totally.
Anger of your 20s.
Right. Anger of my late teens. I would like, carried on a little bit into my early 20s. But look, it's not a good thing to hate the system more than you love people, whatever the system is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It is not.
It's good.
It is not what human hearts were made for,
Yeah.
and it is not the purpose that God gave us.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it actually destroys things.
Yeah. Rather than builds.
It's not just bad for you. Like
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
That's
why I wrote a book called We Need to Build.
Yeah. Right. It's there in the title. Well, I would love, we were talking a little bit beforehand, for each of us, for our religious experiences, our faith, our worldview, all of that. There's so much that we love and that we value and that we hold dear and cherish. And there's also parts where we go, this is kind of I don't know about this part of it or this expression of it. And I think you talk about wrestling. I think that's a healthy thing to go, I love this and I'm not sure about this. And, in my case, in coming to the table as a Christian, there's so much that I love. It's oftentimes those who call themselves Christians that bother me the most. And I find some of my most greatest tension with is some of the ways it manifests itself in the world. I just don't feel connected to or aligned with. So I'd love to hear from you. Maybe Rabbi Rini, we can start with you. What are some of the parts of your religious experience, the totality of all that you explained a moment ago? What are some of the parts that kind of you go, I wish we had this, or I wish we didn't have to do this, or I wish people didn't do what were some of the parts that frustrate you? That's what I want to get into, the juicy stuff.
I don't want to speak badly about my own people, but
Disclaimers.
Here it goes.
Disclaimers.
So we have this idea of machloket l'shem shamayim, which means an argument for the sake of heaven. And so we like to debate, we like to argue. And when it is for the sake of heaven, when we're trying to figure out what is best for the community, what is best for other people's lives, what is best for serving God, that is a argument for the sake of heaven. But when we start to argue with each other, and those arguments are not for the sake of heaven, but it's to win, or it's to prove that I'm right, or it's to prove that I'm more religious than you, or I'm expressing judgment about how you're living Jewishly versus how I'm living Jewishly, that is destructive.
Yeah.
And Jews can be judgmental of each other. I don't think that's unique to Jews, but it's not helpful. So
Someone over here.
that can be really challenging.
Yeah.
I'm all for debate. That's constructive.
Yeah, that builds.
The other piece I would say, and I think you probably heard this as I was trying to introduce myself, is Jewish identity is really complicated and nuanced, as are all identities, and it's always evolving, and we are always wrestling, and I think one of the things that modern Jews are always wrestling with is, how much do I live in the world with everyone, and how much do I live among the Jewish community? And different Jewish communities live differently. Some are more insular, some are less insular. There are pros and cons to all of that. But as Jews have been welcomed and permitted and allowed to live among other people, there's always a tension between how much do we live as part of the world, and how much do we live as a
kind of our own community. Yeah.
community.
That's really helpful to understand. It makes a ton of sense. And when you consider also the long history of anti-Semitism and of the way Jewish people have been treated throughout history and around the world, and right here up to this current moment, I get that. It makes total sense to me to want to pull in, especially given some of that. Father Peter, what would you say for the way that you show up in the world with your faith? What are some of the parts of it that you go, boy, this part kind of frustrates me?
The church is described as family of families, right? In the end, there's a great diversity within a Catholic Church, right? When you look at the body of 1.3 billion Catholics, you say, boy, there has to be a great diversity in it. But it is actually in diversity that we find unity together. And especially these days, over the last 10 years or so, in the Western world, driven largely by U.S., right, there's this great polarization that sinks in from this society into the church, believing that unless you are like me, you have to be bad, right? And that's something Pope Francis really is trying to fight since he was elected the successor of Peter, because his big thing is, no, actually, we are all created uniquely different. And we all are called to conversion of hearts. We all are called to repentance from our evil ways to good ways. But boy, we are all created in the image and likeness of God. We have inherited beauty and love and kindness and all those things about us that we have to respect and find to be true. And it is really in conversation, right, and spending time with one another that you start not only recognizing the diversity of points of view, but you also start seeing that in the end, so much is driven by common experience of communion. For us Catholics, the central thing of all that we do, right, is communion, is the Eucharist. It's meant to be our belief that Christ is truly present to us in his body and blood, and we become in communion with Jesus. So we are capable to be in communion with one another. And what drives me crazy is when we become one in communion with Jesus, and in 10 minutes in the parking lot, we forget to be in communion with one another, right? And it's like, what just happened in the last 10 minutes, right? And so I think the polarization, unfortunately, of the Western world sink in very deeply, at least to the United States Church, the Catholic Church here. And I think we have a hard time of stepping away from it. And I just hope that we listen better. Right now, there's this gathering in October of 450 people from around the world with Pope Francis. But this gathering we call a Synod of Bishops. And so it's not only bishops, it's lay women and men as well. But in the end, they're coming together to listen for a month after 2-year global listening process of kind of say, what do we think the Holy Spirit is calling the church to be right now? And how should that listening shape the relationships that we have with each other today?
Yeah. I think that's a perfect jumping off point to the next question I wanted to ask is that value of listening. Gathering around a table. When we got together this morning, it was very easy for us to just sort of get right in and have conversation, find common ground, talk about things that are important to us. But we don't, people of different faiths don't tend to do this a lot. And I'd love to hear from you, maybe we'll start with you, Ibu, like how does, being a Muslim, how have you traditionally, how has this faith practice traditionally done with having conversations like this, sitting across from people who maybe have a core fundamentally different worldview, and yet being able to sit around the table of fellowship, of community with one another? What's that been like in your experience and also in the kind of the larger experience?
Sure. So here's the way that I'm obviously different from the three of you, right? Is I'm not a faith leader. I'm not a faith leader. Each of you are ordained or the equivalent in a tradition, and you are responsible for a congregation. And that is an enormously challenging place to be, right? So I don't have that challenge. What I am is a civic leader who founded an organization out of the inspiration of my religious tradition and also out of my sense of what it means to be an American and a sense of what the world needs that deals with religious diversity. And so I just have a different approach. I don't have the parking lot experience that you have, right? And I think that's a really powerful and challenging experience and would drive me crazy, right? But that is kind of an occupational hazard for you. So the way that I approach my religion, and I'd like to think the way I approach much of the world is, what do I like and how do I find it, right? What do I like and how do I find it? So the things that I love about Islam are the focus on mercy, the focus on beautiful relationships with other people. So there's a line in the Quran, God made us diverse nations and tribes that we may come to know one another. So an awful lot of Muslim history about engaging positively with diversity, whether it's the Constitution of Medina or whether it's the fact that the first people who recognize the prophethood of Muhammad are Christians. Very interesting, right? And so I'm looking for that. And that kind of feeds my soul. And then I do diversity work. And I'll say it again, diversity is not just the differences you like. So I find the things that feed my soul first. And then I look around and I'm like, okay, and this is what the actual landscape looks like. And now how do I navigate that landscape? And one of the metaphors that I use all the time is when the mountain climber looks at the mountain, she is not surprised. She came to climb the mountain.
That's what it's there for.
That's right. She came to climb the mountain. If you do diversity work and you identify something that is a disagreement, you should not be surprised. You came to bridge that disagreement.
Yeah, it's good.
But in order to do that, I need to be fed. I need to be inspired. I need to know that my anchoring is strong and sound. I want to say my anchoring is just my anchoring. It's my relationship with the tradition. There's many parts of the tradition, right? My anchoring is in its focus on pluralism and mercy, etc. It's not the only reading.
Right.
It's not the only reading.
Of course.
Now, I think that there are things that I don't think wanton violence is part of it. Like, I think there are things that are out beyond the pale, right? Yeah. But I think that there are many legitimate interpretations. I have one, it anchors and guides me, and that's how I navigate the landscape.
I think what's beautiful, Ibu, is that you've not only, found the thing that you like and look for it, you found the thing you like and created it. And by starting Interfaith, you say, okay, yes, I see this all over here, but I want to be a part of creating that, getting on that mountain and helping inviting others to do that as well. I think while you would say that maybe we have a sort of a different day job and being faith leaders, I think you have your own unique set of challenges as you're dealing with all sorts of different spheres, influence, power, politics, all of it as you're trying to help people move together in the same direction. I want to come back to that in a second.
What time's our staff meeting today? Speaking of challenges.
Yeah. You actually have a business that you're also trying to run that does all this work. That's right. Rabbi Rini, what would you say, you talked a minute ago about how there's this tension, a wrestling, if you will, between how much do we engage in the world and be a part of the world, how much do we come back to and hold into our community. How has the Jewish tradition, in your experience, personally and beyond, done at engaging with people of other faiths and other religious worldviews?
I think there's a lot of room for us to grow in that area. Speaking about my rabbinic colleagues, I know some of my colleagues have built long-lasting, meaningful relationships with clergy of other faiths. Sometimes that has grown into relationships between communities, sometimes not. I'm part of some dialogue groups where I sit and study religious texts, Jewish and from other faiths with other clergy. Sometimes I wonder how that could grow into more concentric circles of relationships beyond the people in that room. I think it's when I talked about this in terms of different Jews just getting along with each other. When it comes to wanting to be open-minded and open to other people's ways of viewing the world, I'll think about like integrity. And I don't want to say versus, but integrity, my own integrity, and open-mindedness. And sometimes those are intentions, right? So there are certain lines that for the sake of my own integrity, I can't cross. And really what I'm talking about is the Torah says that all human beings are created in the image of God. And in every Jewish service, we come back to our foundational stories. The creation of the world, all human beings are created in the image of God. God redeemed us from Egypt in order to serve God. And receiving the Torah, whether that comes from God or it was written by human beings or some kind of combination, but the Torah is the Jewish people's toolbox for living in the world. It's our toolbox. Other faiths have other beautiful toolboxes. So if I come into conversation with someone and I have a sense that there are people that they don't see as created in the image of God and don't respond to those people with the same kind of dignity and respect as every human being deserves, then that can be a conversation stopper. Other than that, I think there's a curiosity that I think often people of faith share, and that's why when we met each other this morning, it was so easy for us to hold hands and to talk with each other because we all come from that point of seeing the image of God in each other.
Yes, absolutely. Good. Probably far more that we would agree on. But I think you're right. There's a tension of how do I show up open to loving, but also with an integrity of, but these are also my core beliefs. These things are not up for grabs, but that doesn't mean that I cannot be in a relationship with you if you don't hold to those. And I would say for my faith tradition, going back to the previous question of what frustrates you and bugs you, I would say largely that for folks who've called themselves Christian, not exclusively, certainly not exclusively, largely, we have seen other faiths as opposition. And there is a sort of mentality of we have to win them over. And that has manifested itself in some truly horrific expressions throughout history. And it's also manifested itself in, Christians can just be real bummers at parties because they have, the agenda is that winning over. And I don't believe that actually aligns with the mission of Jesus. I believe the mission of Jesus, as he laid out very clearly, is that we would love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and that we would love our neighbor as ourselves. That's my agenda. How can I love you? How can I be of service to you? How can I love God by loving you? And I think that we have I am very aware, and I feel sad at times, of the history of seeing people of other faith expressions as sort of opposition to us, or we want nothing to do with them because they don't align on the mission we have, when I think that's a misinterpretation or a misreading, at least on our end, of the mission of Jesus, which is to love God and to love others. And at the risk of getting you fired up, Ibu, I would love, because of the work that you do, I would love for you just to paint a picture of what is possible when we can sit at the table like this. What is possible when people of different faiths, this is what you do. I believe this is the work that you've been put in this world to do, is to help people align on the things that we can align on for the greater good. What is possible when we actually learn to do this?
Yeah. So let me tell you a story. In the city of Mostar, in the country of Bosnia-Herzegovina, when there is a fire on the Muslim side of the city, the Catholic fire department does not respond. When there's a fire on the Catholic side of the city, the Muslim fire department does not respond. Have you ever heard of a story like that in the United States? No.
Pretty,
we live in a pretty unique place.
yeah, that's not,
Let's cherish it.
yeah.
And
I feel like we're close, I'm not going to lie to you. I feel like we're so close to crossing some of those lines.
but I think the first thing we have to do is recognize what's been built.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, Christians and Jews have built a lot of it.
Mm.
So what do you think the largest social service organizations in the United States are after the federal government?
Mm-hmm.
Catholic Charities,
Yeah.
Salvation Army.
Yeah.
Okay. The YMCA, the Young Men's Christian Association, is the second largest association in America after AAA. the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, Jewish Refugee Resettlement Services, which is built in the late 19th century to resettle Jews who are suffering from largely Russian and European pogroms. Jews, for the most part, don't need to be resettled anymore, okay? The Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society has not closed. You know what it does? It resettles other people. And so I actually think we live in a very special country in which people from particular religious identities build institutions which serve people of all religious identities. And I think what we need to do is tell that story.
That's
right?
so good. I mean, you can
Tell
tell
that
some of my
story.
cynicism when you started this.
But I think it's actually a beautiful thing for somebody from a different religion to remind you, like, I'm in this country because the Catholic University, started by the Order of the Holy Cross, which founded a college in the Indiana Prairie, admitted my dad to their MBA program. And when I asked Father Ted Hesburgh, the great longtime half-century leader of Notre Dame University, why did he open this university, which was founded for the advancement of poor Midwestern Catholic boys during a time of great anti-Catholicism in America? Why did he open it up to people from other religions? And he told me it's because the word Catholic means both fidelity to a particular church and universal, right? So, and so many of our religions in America live there, right? So the Inner City Muslim Action Network, based here in Chicago, my friend Rami Nashashibi, the founder, most of the people it serves are non-Muslim. And that's one of the most Islamic things it does, right? It is a manifestation of the Muslim value of mercy here in the city of Chicago. I think it's important for us to tell that story. It's okay to be a little self-deprecating about one's own faith, but it's important to tell the positive story about other people's faith and what we already do together, right?
Right.
Like,
It's already happening.
Right now, in every hospital within 10 square miles, there are Muslims, Christians, and Jews who said their prayers who are saving the life of an atheist. In every hospital right now. Let's tell that story.
Yeah. I think that's so good. And I think, boy, Ibu, it really is, it comes down to the stories we tell ourselves and the stories we tell others. And yeah, each of us could go around and as we were a little hard on some of our faith expressions and our religious experiences, we could also brag on and tell stories of, but this great good that's happening right now, or this great good that's happened throughout history. And that you're exactly right. It's very rarely have those things been exclusively for just people of that religious worldview. They bless the world. And I love that idea of let's tell a better story. Let's show it. And especially we're here in the city of Chicago. We need stories. We need those stories to be told, because I feel the cynicism. I look out at our city, I look out at our world, and I go, I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever be able to turn this around. And to be reminded, encouraged, there's actually already good work on the ground happening. You just don't see it. You don't know it.
But sure we can. Sure, I mean, like, there's two ways to look at the world, right? One is heaven is your reference point, and you work backwards, and you measure the gap. And boy, are we far. The other reference point is where human beings were 10,000 years ago and what we've built.
Yeah.
And every time we turn on a light switch, think, oh my gosh, that's a miracle, right? There's a beautiful line by Bono in Song for Joey Ramone. He says, I woke up at the moment that the miracle occurred. And you hear that over and over, and you realize, oh, wait a second. The miracle is always occurring.
Yeah.
The question is, are you awake?
Yeah. I love that. Well, I would love to tell some better stories over the.
I imagine you're a pretty good storyteller.
Well, I don't know about that, but I do love a good story, and I love a better story. I think that's really important. Like, there is a better story, and I'd love to do that around this table real quick. We can go into, as we kind of wind this conversation down, we're going to go into the lightning round of questions, where I'd love for each of you to answer just briefly what comes to mind, what comes up for you when I ask the question. And so the first question I'd love for each of you, we'll start with you, Father Peter. First question is, what would be one hope that you have when you think about people working maybe across the lines like this, and whatever it may be, whether it's faith, religion, socioeconomic, political, what's one hope or picture you have that you're holding on to, a better story, for people to cross lines and be able to work on a greater good together? What would that look like? And we'll just go through each of you. What's a hope you have? What's something that you'd love to see?
To know the stories, right, is to know the individuals. And I think my hope is that in a world that is incredibly busy and we are all stretched and always behind, and that we don't see building relationships as a waste of time, right? That we actually stop and step back and say, actually something holy happens. There's a sacredness in sharing one story. And in that, we hear a lot of things that really are very hopeful to us, right? You look at a city like Chicago, no doubt, we have a lot of problems all across the city, and yet, here in the Archdiocese of Chicago, we run a lot of Catholic schools. We educate almost 50,000 kids every day. But our greatest partners are the Jewish partners, right? Actually, the Jewish community is one of the greatest supporters of Catholic schools, not only in Chicago, actually across the world, right? And so you don't know that until you enter into dialogue and you say, boy, there's actually a lot of collaboration, right? I think not super far from here, West Humboldt Park, we operate Mission of Our Lady of the Angels at the site where tragic fire took many, many lives of students and religious sisters. And now is a thriving community of religious sisters, Franciscans, and brothers who are serving underserved communities in the city. And each time I go, there's people from all faith traditions doing this work. I mean, there is so much of it already happening. It's really stepping back, paying attention, and really kind of saying, what is it that we can do together that do two things? One is it enables us to go deeper in our faith and appreciate our own identity and roots, and at the same time live them out in a way that we can learn from one another and with one another, that we can make a city a better place. That's the only way a city will become a better place.
Yes, through that relationship, through that knowing, that being with each other, that does take time, but bears so much more fruit. I love that. Rini, what would you say?
I'm going to think for a moment because I was listening so intently to what you were saying. I wasn't necessarily forming my own thoughts. Just to keep trying, to try and not think that it has to be perfect and that everything is going to go smoothly every time, and to be invested enough that when it doesn't go perfectly, we can keep moving forward together. And maybe not to be so concerned with what each other believes, because we don't all believe the same thing, to come together and do good together.
Yes.
And not necessarily get so hung up on, this is what I believe, this is what you believe. There's enough that we all believe that we can do a lot of good together.
Ibu, what would be your one hope or picture?
So one of the earlier articulations of a mutual loyalty pact that affirmed the distinctiveness of different communities in a city and said we ought to come together when necessary was created by the Prophet Muhammad in Medina in the home of a rabbi. So he gathered together the elders of Medina, which was a very disputatious city when he moved there. He gathered them in the home of Rabbi Mukarik, and they developed something called the Constitution of Medina. And I just think that that's like 622, 623, AD, a common era. Like that's an inspiring moment.
Yeah.
That's an inspiring, but we live in a world of inspiring moments.
Yeah.
When at a time of great international tension, when people with different loyalties around the world are working together in a little league or on a PTA or for a school play, that's really inspiring.
It is.
People thought it was impossible.
Yeah.
For generations, political philosophers thought it was impossible.
Yeah.
And we do it every day in America. And let's cherish that.
That's a great reminder. I love that. And again, when you talk about going back to telling a better story, it's small stories, little stories. It's this happened today.
Yeah.
This is, I came across this today, or I got to be a part of this today. And the more we tell that to each other, I think the more that becomes
So I'll tell you a quick story. So my wife's name is Shanaz, which means pride of the king. And when my kids were young, one day we're all driving as a family in the car, and I'm kind of joking. I'm like, your mom's name is pride of the king. That's what it translates at. Who's the king? And my older son says, Jesus. Why? Because he went to Catholic school. That's right.
He just got his answer.
That's right. So that's just, I love these little moments. I love these little moments.
Were you hoping they were going to say
that's exactly
you
right.
were the king?
I'm the king.
Okay, Jesus is a good answer. God, let's be honest. Oh, it's so funny. Well, I want to close with this. There's for each of our sort of religious experience, our cultural identity, our faith expression, whatever words you want to use. There are a lot of other stories being told, and some rooted in reality, and some judgments and people who would rather just sort of tear down than build up. I would love for you, and we'll just work right back down the line again, to tell us something beautiful, something that you love, that you want all of us to know about your experience, your faith expression. What would be something you just would want anyone who listening, no matter where they would fall on sort of a faith religion spectrum, to know about Catholic faith, to know about the Jewish expression, to know about the Muslim faith? I'd love to hear that from each of you. Can we start with you, Father Peter?
Sure. One of the stories that always kind of transformed my life is really of this man whose name is Maximilian Kolbe. Maximilian was a Franciscan friar. He lives in Poland, in Japan, back in Poland. And as the Second World War broke up, together with all the Franciscans, he was arrested and put in Auschwitz. And one of the soldiers escaped. One of the inmates escaped. And what happened is, of course, that they would call everybody in, and you have to count to 10, and every 10th person would be shot to 10. And Francis was number 9. The man next to him, a Jewish man, Francis Gajowniczak, he was number 10. And he cried out because he said, I have children, I have family. And he stepped out. And he said, I'm a Catholic priest, I don't have family, take me. And they took him to starvation bunker, and in the end, they killed him. But it's the bravery, the church in the 2,000 years of history in the church since Acts of the Apostles until now. The church always struggled, but in the struggle, God always sent incredible people. In the greatest time in the history, or the worst time in the history of the church, God sent people we call saints, the greatest people, Francis of Assisi, Catherine of Siena, and Maximilian Kolbe, and so many others who really drew people's hearts back to what's most important and remind them about the common humanity that we share and co-responsibility for one another, as Francis called his followers all the way to today. And so I think that that's all what we are called to exercise. So I just see so much of it every single day. And I think in a world that is so divided and so broken by wars and hatred, we just need this experience of common humanity.
Yeah.
And that's inspiring to me.
I love that. Thank you. Rabbi Rainier, what would you say? Something you just want us all to know that you love about your Jewish experience.
Well, there isn't a midrash, a kind of story I want to share. Maybe I'll say a few things and you can decide what you want to keep. One is there's a story that after God split the sea and the Israelites came through and the Egyptians were drowning in the sea, the angels in heaven started singing. And God rebuked them and said, how can you be singing at a moment my creations are drowning in the sea? And that speaks to me in this particular moment. We would never rejoice, ever, over the death of any human being, ever. So I guess I just want to say that. The other thing I want to share is that Jewish people in this country have flourished in ways we didn't anywhere else. And because we were welcome to do so, and we were welcomed by our neighbors, and we were able to go to schools, and we were able to work in certain occupations that had been prohibited for so long. And so I think American Jews, and this is maybe unique to America, not Judaism per se, but we're very proud of the life and very grateful and proud of the lives that we've been able to live in this country. And therefore feel obligated to help open those doors and provide those kinds of opportunities for other people who are at different places in their journeys of making a good life for themselves and for their family. The last thing I'll say that I think is important to know about Judaism is that Judaism is, we sanctify time. We don't sanctify space. We sanctify time. And when we say a blessing before we eat, or the blessings of our prayers, the goal of those blessings is to elevate our awareness to that moment in time. And our holidays are holy time. And at the end of the Sabbath, we say a blessing and we praise God as the one who separates between holy time and regular time. And it's in that regular time when we're supposed to be working for a better world. That is it's not regular time. It's a different kind of time when we work towards a better world. And it's the holiness of the Sabbath when we rest, as God rested. And so I think the sanctity of time and the way we guard time is an important and possibly unique aspect of Jewish life.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's a beautiful mix. That's a beautiful way of seeing time, space, the world, and sanctifying that time and marking that is so important. It's so important. What would you say is something you want us all to know?
Yeah, well, the first thing I want to say is that the sacrifice and the contributions that have been made by Catholics and Jews, that's entirely my experience of Catholics and Jews. And I want to thank you for that, right? And I'll tell you the thing you didn't talk about is the unbelievably ugly anti-Catholicism and anti-Semitism in America that you endured and overcame for the most part. What I mean is that it's almost behind us. There are ugly emergings of it, particularly now with anti-Semitism. But there were times in America where your communities were hated and you still flourished, and your response was, we are going to build things for everyone. We're going to build an America that's better for everyone. And I think that is entirely consonant with the arc of the Muslim tradition. And so my direct answer to your question is, there's a beautiful line in the Holy Quran that God made the Prophet Muhammad Rahmatul Alameen, nothing but a special mercy upon all the worlds.
Love that. I love that. I would say, just bringing my experience to the table, I think one of the things that I would want people to know, people who would call themselves followers of Jesus, I'd want them to know about us is the thing that we are supposed to be known by, and that's our love. And I know that when people of my faith experience and my background lead with love, it is so much better. And we go so much further. And that we would root ourselves in the reality of being loved, and then we get to go be loved to others. When I see that, when I get to experience that, when I get to participate in that, when I've been blessed by that, there's nothing like it. And it's one of the things I think is so special, is that rooting in love. And I love when I see it, and I'd love to see it more. And so I want to thank each of you for giving this time and being so generous for this conversation, giving of your time, of yourself. I know all of you have very full plates and busy lives, that you would carve out this time to do really what we want to see more of, is to sit shoulder to shoulder with each other, to tell a better story, and to see how much more we have in common and the greater good that we can accomplish together. So thank you, thank you, thank you. You've been incredibly insightful and inspiring to all of us. So thank you very much.